Marshall Chriswell is with us, another installment of Marshall Law, and this program intended to be for informational purposes only. The information does not constitute legal advice. The law is constantly changing. The information may not be complete or correct depending on the date and your particular legal problem. Each legal problem depends on its individual facts, and different jurisdictions have different laws and regulations. And because of that, you should not act or rely on any information in this segment without seeking the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction for your particular problem. Maybe a guy like Marshall Chriswell is on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us here today.
Nice to be here.
You spoke with Josh last week, and you were talking about real estate law, huh?
We did. We talked about real estate transactions and kind of the steps that are involved and title issues and things of that nature.
Yeah. Now let's expand that discussion a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about real estate law, and in particular the types of ownership of real estate that you can be involved in a particular type that you might want to explore. And that would be an LLC. Tell us about that. What is an LLC, for those who don't know, and why would it be advantageous for someone to pursue that type of real estate transaction?
Sure. So whenever you take ownership of property, generally you're going to own the property solely in your own name, or maybe with your spouse or other co-owners. But when you're dealing with real estate, particularly real estate that you don't live in, so we're not generally talking about your primary residence, but if you have a rental property, another type of investment property, vacant land, camp property, family-owned real estate. Lots of times the siblings maybe own the family home, to the old family homestead together, things like that. You want to consider placing ownership of the property into a business entity rather than holding it in your own name or with other co-owners. And there are several reasons for that. But the business entity that's most often used is an LLC, as you mentioned. There are other types of business entities: a corporation, a partnership, a restricted partnership. There are all different types of entities, but an LLC is most commonly used for this purpose, and that's because it's the most flexible type of business entity. It's the easiest to set up and maintain. But it still provides you with the liability protection and the other benefits of corporate ownership.
Now, people would hear that, and if they don't have any legal experience at all, they might say, that all sounds very, very complicated, and I'm not a complicated person. I don't want to get involved in something like that. But it's not complicated at all, is it?
Well, it's not extremely complicated. Yes, is it going to involve a couple more steps and a little bit more work than if you were taking title of the property solely or with another person as joint owners? Yes, it will. But the benefits can outweigh those minor inconveniences in a big way in the long run.
All right. So tell me what some of those benefits would be.
First of all, the LLC, and LLC stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's so the LLC is essentially a business entity that you would own, and anybody else that is a co-owner of this property, you would own the business entity, the LLC, and then the LLC would in turn own the real estate. So let's say you and your partner want to buy a rental property, and so you form an LLC. It has to be registered with the state. There are legal documents that have to be created, an operating agreement, a certificate of organization, a few other things. So you form this LLC, and let's say you want to call it. Let's say, Todd. Let's say you and I are purchasing this. We'll call it Todd and Marshall LLC. So we formed this LLC with the state. You and I are 50-50 owners of it. And then whenever we purchase our rental property, we actually put the deed will be transferred from the sellers into Todd and Marshall LLC.
Okay.
So now we own the LLC, but we don't own the real estate. Our company does.
Oh, okay.
And that provides different benefits. A big one is liability protection. If something happens at that rental property, that someone gets injured, or something else occurs to create liability, and then someone, the person who gets injured, say somebody falls down the steps at the rental property, or is walking by on the sidewalk and slips on the ice, and they file a lawsuit. They're going to sue the owners of the property, which is Todd and Marshall LLC. They're not going to be able to sue us personally. Okay. So the liability, our liability, is limited to the amount of equity that we have in that particular building, that particular property. And they can't reach our personal assets, our bank accounts, our cars, other things, our homes, other things that we may own solely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for putting me first in that partnership, by the way.
No problem. So yeah, that's one of the biggest benefits of having an LLC is to limit liability. But there are other benefits. One is that you have privacy, right? So if someone looks at the ownership records, and here maybe I didn't have the best example. I called it Todd and Marshall LLC, mm-hmm. but we could call our LLC anything that we wanted, right? And someone would look at the ownership records, at the land records, the tax records, and they would see the name of our LLC as the owners, but they wouldn't necessarily know that Todd and Marshall are the owners of that property.
Pretty Little Bluebird LLC.
What's that?
Our company is called Pretty Little Bluebird LLC.
Yeah, and so they look at in the assessment records. Somebody researches the deeds, and they see these rental properties that are owned by Pretty Little Bluebird LLC, and they would then probably have no idea that Todd and Marshall are the actual owners of these properties, which to some folks is very important to have the anonymity.
Yeah. Okay. That's now LLC is the one that we're talking about, and one that seems to have great advantages. Are there others?
The LLC is most commonly used for this purpose. As I said, there are other business entities under Pennsylvania law. You can form a corporation, a business corporation. You can form a nonprofit corporation if we own this building for the purpose of for a charitable purpose. Maybe it was a homeless shelter. Maybe it was the offices for another nonprofit that we're running. Then you could own it as in the name of a nonprofit corporation. You can use a partnership, a limited partnership. All sorts of business entities exist, and there may be reasons for using one or the other, but LLCs are far and away the most popular because, again, they provide flexibility. With corporations and other types of business entities, there are strict requirements to form them and to maintain them. There are tax implications that are more complicated than I could get into at this point. But the LLC is, like I said, hands down the easiest and most flexible way to do this.
Now, that being the case, are there any disadvantages to forming an LLC? So,
one thing is if you're buying property and you think, hey, I may want to own this as a separate in a separate business entity at some point. Whenever you're buying it, go ahead and do it. Put it into the LLC at that point, because one of the big disadvantages is if you own real estate, say you and I own this rental property in our own names, jointly here, and somewhere down the line we decide, we want to put this into an LLC. Let's create this business entity and transfer the real estate to an LLC. At that point, there are transfer taxes that are involved. You've got to pay 2% of the fair market value of the property, and in transfer taxes to actually transfer ownership, whereas you don't have to deal with that if you do it up front. So transferring into and out of an LLC is a little bit inconvenient and can be expensive. But if you get it into the LLC right up front, whenever you purchase the property, you don't have to deal with that. Another thing that's interesting to point out is, when you buy and sell real estate, normally every transfer is indicated on the land records with a deed, right? There's a new deed every time someone transfers ownership of real estate. Another nice thing about using an LLC is that if you and I own Pretty Little Bluebird LLC and we want to add another owner, or we want to sell the property, rather than recording new deeds, you can just change the ownership structure of the LLC.
Oh, yeah.
And those are in our private business records and don't have to be placed on the books with the courthouse. So that's another benefit.
Yeah, well, certainly LLCs are worthy of exploration, and probably, if you're going to have any sort of a business venture, something that you would certainly want to consider. And all of that being the case, obviously you will need an attorney involved in that, and you're one of those who obviously knows your way around this whole subject. So what do people need to do if they want to begin an LLC and put their purchase? I'm assuming that somebody who has a piece of property right now and wants to transfer that and turn it into an LLC, that's not a very complicated process, correct?
No, we need to form the LLC, and so we talk through obviously what the structure of that is going to be. They're, like I said, very flexible, lots of different options for how the ownership is structured and the management of the company, and then we get it all put together and filed with the state, and then we do a deed transfer, and it's not hard.
Just that simple. Very good. So to do that, we should contact you. What should we do?
Call 724-465-5826. Come see me in the old RMP Cole building on Church Street behind the post office, or go online to www.westernpalawyer.com.
Very good. Marshall Chriswell, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks a lot, Todd. Take care.
You too. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160. AM 1160.